This is the Horse Radio Network. This is episode 9 of the Stable Scoop Radio Show, Natural Horsemanship with Dr. Miller and Friends.
Welcome to the Stable Scoop, with weekly shows delivered right to you. With Helena and Glenn the Geek, live from the stable, it's every week. They'll bring you the news through hail or high water, while using their tails as their own fly swatters. So sit on down and laugh till you poop, cause it's time again for the Stable Scoop. Stable Scoop. The Stable Scoop. Stable Scoop.
I am Glenn the Geek.
And I'm Helena B.
And I'm Colleen from beautiful Colorado.
And this is the Stable Scoop Radio Show on the Horse Radio Network.
And we have a great show planned for today. Today's show is all about natural horsemanship and its changes over the last couple of years. Natural horsemanship as a term has been around for quite a while, but I think in the last couple of years we've seen some changes in many ways around natural horsemanship. So we're going to talk about that today. And regardless of how you feel about that subject, I think it's important to explore it. We have some great guests to talk about it today. We have some of the leading experts on the subject, so we're excited about that. But before we get into that, I wanted to mention, Helena, on next week's show, we're very excited to have silver medalist Gina Miles. We got her for an interview for next week's show. So next week's show will be all about eventing. So I'm excited about that, and we're excited to do that interview. And also, Helena, we caused quite a stir last week when we talked about cloning. If anybody listened to last week's show, for those of you that did, Helena and I, the subject of cloning horses came up, and Gem Twist and Cavero 5 had just been cloned. And Helena and I had somewhat of a lively discussion about the matter.
And, big surprise there.
Yeah, and I think everybody knows how you and I feel about it now. Well, believe it or not, the next day I got a call from the company who actually did the cloning, the scientific company who did the cloning in Texas, who actually cloned these two horses, and they wanted to come on to at least get an opportunity to explain it from the science side of things. So in 2 weeks, we're going to have a show that's all about cloning. We're going to have them on to explain it about the science side, and then we're going to have the other side on, too, to talk about why maybe even from a moral point of view this isn't good. But we thought it would be a good idea, because it did cause a little bit of a stir, to talk about it and to at least learn both sides of the story and then let people decide for themselves.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to it, so we're going to present both sides and let you all have at it.
Yes, after our show.
It's going to be a good one.
All right.
And as you heard, everybody, we have a co-host with us today. We have Colleen, otherwise known as DC, of the Natural Horse Network. And she does a live call-in talk show all about natural horsemanship, and that's at naturalhorsenetwork.com. And we are super glad to have her on here to guide us through this discussion today about natural horsemanship. So welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We are going to start off, and you're going to this is baptism by fire here. You're going to start us off with the Reader's Digest version of exactly what natural horsemanship is, or what it was and maybe what it is today. So take your pick.
Okay, so you want the short version.
Yes.
To me, I'll make it simple. To me, it's just the art of working, training, riding horses in a manner that works with the horse's instincts and behavior and personality rather than against it. It's more of a partnership rather than a relationship based on dominance.
So it's working with the horse, and that encompasses many different things now. That's not just training of the horses, right? It's feed, and it's
Exactly.
feed and feet and all the things that go with it.
It's the whole horse, taking care of the whole horse, mind, body, and spirit.
What do you mean by you're working with the horse's natural instincts versus against it? What's an example of working traditional training that works against a horse's natural instincts?
Traditional would be where they use say, a severe bit, something like that, where they are trying to control the horse's behavior through force rather than working with the horse in their own language.
Okay.
So we almost have to become, we have to become like the horse in order to communicate with them on their level.
And now that has progressed into all of these other things as well, the feeding and the care, the veterinary care, the farrier care, all of that now has become part of this. I know that part of this, from what I was reading, is also the barefoot riding and that aspect, focusing a little bit here on the farrier care.
Mm-hmm.
And is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Farrier care meaning keeping your horses barefoot.
Yes.
That's part of natural horsemanship.
Yep. And then the feeding, tell us a little bit about the feeding. What's different about feeding naturally than feeding the way somebody who really just feeds?
The way people are just taught to feed, or they just learn it that way, which is just to buy a bag of feed. The most common is buying grain, sweet grain for your horse, which is it's not healthy for them because there's a lot of byproducts, and then the amount of sugar in there. We have a lot of insulin-resistant horses out there right now. It's becoming quite dangerous, I think, and so you really have to be aware, just like what you put in your body, what you put in your horse's body. So it's just a matter of being a little bit more careful and choosy about what you feed, and try to feed them what's natural to them, not what you think they might want. You know, you want to give them a treat. It's not necessarily a sugar-laden treat that's good for them. And that's what most treats out there on the market are. They're full of molasses and sugar. It's not easy to find healthy treats.
Now, you mentioned on your website, naturalhorsenetwork.com, you quote Catherine Bird, wrote a book called A Healthy Horse the Natural Way, that traditional veterinary medicine and natural therapies are not mutually exclusive. I think that's a really important point to make, and I was wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about how that works in your life. And
that sums it up exactly how I feel and what we try to bring about through our community and my website, is because it doesn't have to be one or the other. They both need to work together in a balance. There are times when you need traditional medicine, but you can also be aware of what you're feeding your horse and what you're giving it. And there are alternatives to some of the traditional medicines, such as, say, bute. There are herbs that you can give. But I don't want people to get the impression that you have to be one or the other. And that seems to be going on out there a lot. Well, if you do this, you're not really natural. And I don't believe that. I think it's finding a balance between the two.
So you do believe that when there's a time for antibiotics, there's a time for antibiotics?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that will dispel one of the big myths that is out there.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a balance there.
There is a balance. And there are times when definitely you need it, and you'd be foolish not to. We still need our vets, absolutely.
So the underlying foundation of natural horsemanship is really common sense and looking, like you said, at the big picture of the whole horse, not just au naturel all the way, you know, my way or the highway, and not
exactly
just old school, let's control every part of this animal all the time. There's a sort of a yin and yang, a balance that you have to strike. But it sounds like it's mostly common sense, which, as you guys know, there's not common sense isn't quite so common.
No, it's not. People tend to follow what they read and hear, as you probably know, and there is a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet. So my purpose was to try to bring together people and bring accurate information for people to learn. Because there's a lot of people out there that are new to horse riding, or they used to ride and now they're getting back into riding, and it's a whole new world for them. All of a sudden there's all this new information, and it's very overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. Even for those of us who've been around for a while, it's overwhelming because new stuff comes out all the time, and there's new avenues for communicating in the internet.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this leads me into our first guest today. Our first guest, and we're excited to have him, is considered the godfather of natural horsemanship. He is a veterinarian. He's an author of multiple books, including Imprint Training, Ranchin', Ropin', and Doctorin'. And his latest book is Natural Horsemanship Explained. He's someone who's really dedicated his life to this. He's been working with horses and solving problems as a colt starter, an equine veterinarian for half a century. Not too many of us can say that. And as a breeder and trainer of horses and mules. I know he's big into mules, and he loves mules, which I do too, so that's great. He is one of the pioneers in the concept of natural horsemanship and has worked closely with many of the world's top technicians. What he tends to do is provide the scientific reasons why their training methods work. So let's welcome Dr. Robert Miller. Hi, Dr. Miller. We're glad to have you on today.
Thank you.
Hey, there's so much to cover on the subject of natural horsemanship, and we certainly don't have time for that in this hour program. So what I wanted today's show to be about is how natural horsemanship has changed in the last few years. But before we get into that, tell us what the term natural horsemanship means to you.
This, what I call revolution in horsemanship, began in the late 70s when Ray Hunt took what he'd learned from Tom Dorrance to the public. And he showed that you could actually make a better living teaching people how to teach horses than you can teaching horses. And others saw his success and got on the bandwagon. Pat Pirelli, who was a young man at the time, said, I can do that. And Monty Roberts, who had been doing the sort of thing secretly, went public with it. So that's when it began. It was Pirelli who came up with the term natural horsemanship, and for want of a better name, that seems to have been widely adopted. It's been criticized by people saying, well, there's nothing natural about it. It's the only thing natural for a horse is not to be domesticated. But I think it's an appropriate term because the methods of communication are what are natural to the horse, particularly the body language that's natural to the horse. And it's enabled us to train horses and to get them to do what we want without the use of force and coercion and the infliction of pain.
Right. And I think that's an important point. And it is interesting to hear a little bit about the history about how that all started way back when and how people were in the closet with their training methods at that point.
Well, it was very common in the past for trainers to keep their methods secret to protect their living, or that's what they thought they were doing. And, for example, in the 1700s, Sullivan in Ireland, the original horse whisperer, would not allow anybody to watch what he was doing. He would lock himself in a barn with a problem horse, and they heard him speaking softly, and so that's why they got the idea of the whisperer. But, of course, he was doing other things with the horse, and then after a period of time he came out and the horse was completely changed in its behavior. But he wouldn't even confess to the village priest what he was doing. He kept it secret. So this was rather common throughout the history of the horse industry, but not always. There were people that shared their information either with a son, for example, or a protege. And there were a few that wrote it down, going as far back as Xenophon 2,500 years ago. But since the majority of the people working with horses were not educated or were often illiterate, this information really never got widespread until, as I said, in the last part of the 20th century.
So you wrote an interesting article, Dr. Miller, in 2006 after the whole Barbaro incident, talking about the fact that you're not opposed to racing or showing, but you also explained from a veterinary point of view that you are opposed to horses who are started too early, drugged too heavily, or altered for the show ring. And I found that a very fascinating article because I agree with almost all of that. There's a lot of talk now about cleaning up some of these sports. Do you really think that it's going to happen, or is it just lip service?
Well, yeah, I think it's like the natural horsemanship movement. The historical moment has to arrive. I think we may be approaching the historical moment. there's no question that, as I said, I'm not opposed to racing. I'm not opposed to the showing of horses, but there's something in human nature that tends for us to exaggerate the things we do with horses almost to a grotesque standpoint.
Well, I would argue that's not just with horses, the human nature exaggerating.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it.
Look at our financial system. We did the same thing there.
Yeah, a year ago I would have said, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had to throw that in.
No, there's no question about that. We do carry things to an extreme, and I think our culture is really inclined to do that way, to do too much too fast. That's one reason that we've achieved as much as we have, but there's also a downside to it. But we can take some of the most beautiful performance possible out of a horse, and then we exaggerate it to the point of grotesqueness. For one example, would be the Tennessee walking horse, an absolutely fantastic breed of horse, and we've taken those gaits and we've exaggerated to the point where they are, quote, grotesque. Another example would be Western Pleasure. If you think about it, the Western horse is the cowboy horse. A cowboy would rather walk than ride one of those things. But we do this for a variety of reasons. One of them, of course, is money. One of the primary motivators is money.
Right. And our natural competitiveness, too. I mean, if you take the competition out of horses, what motivation do you have to bring these behaviors to their grotesqueness? I mean, what gets us to those extremes?
Well, you have to set a basis for what is appropriate. Right now, there's a lot going on with cross country, for example. They have made some of the courses so difficult that they're dangerous, both to the horse and to the rider. We've had people killed. Is it necessary to go to that extreme?
It's funny you bring that. It's funny you bring that up, because that is our show next week, is on eventing and talking about the meetings they've been having and what they plan to do to clean that up. So it is funny that you just brought that up.
Yeah, and we do this, and no breed is free of it, and no discipline. We see it everywhere, and as having been in the horse industry for so many years, I see a tendency for these things to get worse and worse until they reach a crisis point, and then something finally gets done about it.
So what's the crisis point? What is the crisis point? What's it going to take for something to get done about it?
I think we're almost there. I think we're pretty much at a crisis.
In many cases, I think so. When we see intra-articular drugs that are used to treat injuries that are caused by overwork and strain, and they're advertised and promoted as a supplement, like it's perfectly normal to inject these joints. You inject these joints to keep them normal, not to treat injury, but to keep them normal. This is not acceptable. Not for me anyway. We ask too much of these horses. When I was young, and I spent my summers working on ranches and starting colts. What we called a colt was typically a 4-year-old, occasionally a 5-year-old, sometimes as old as 6 starting colts. Now we're talking about under 2 years of age, starting them that young. And we know from human orthopedics, we know the injury that occurs to these young athletes that are overworked.
Yeah,
they pay for it the rest of their life. The difference between the human is you could have arthritic joints and still function as a human being. Right. But when a horse gets to that state, unless it happens to be a brood bear, it's all over.
What do you think the optimal age is? Is it 3 years old to start? Is it 4? Or does it depend on the horse?
Well, there's nothing wrong with starting a 2-year-old if you just plunk around on them. You can do a lot of good. But as I said, the tendency is to compete on these animals and exaggerate. And Unfortunately, it's all money driven. The breeders want to move those horses out to the market as fast as possible. The trainers know it's so much easier to start a 2-year-old than a 3 or 4-year-old. They're so much more submissive at that age. So it's to the trainer's advantage, the agent's advantage. The owners of the horse, they're in a big hurry to get into competition and start winning. And even the veterinary profession is profiting by the damage that's done to the overuse of these young horses.
Well, it sounds like we have to get natural horsemanship to these people, to these levels of competition, and to these owners and to these trainers. And you said it's going to take a revolution. How do we start the revolution? And then what do you think is going to be the best way into the lives of these people, treating the whole horse, the natural techniques? How do we get there?
It is happening. What we see is we wanted to see it happen overnight, and it is happening. This natural horsemanship movement is, as you say, one of the reasons that it's going to change, because what it's done, if you'll think about the top clinicians, there's only 1 or 2 of them that is involved in the showing of horses. Most of them completely showing. What they teach is the relationship with the horse, and for many horse owners, that satisfies them. They don't need the ribbons. They don't need the ego-satisfying wins. I've competed. My wife has competed, but not when it's going to damage the horse. We think too much of our horses. We don't want to see them hurt.
Now, you did I guess your latest book, from what I understand, is Natural Horsemanship Explained. Tell us a little bit about what's different about that book than your other books.
Well, the first book, Revolution in Horsemanship, that wasn't my first book, but that was the first one that we actually devoted to this natural horsemanship movement. I wrote that with co-author Rick Lamb.
Oh, yeah.
And it was basically, I think his orientation, and he contributed half the chapters, was basically the history of the movement. My personal motivation was to reach the people who were not involved or interested. First of all, there's still a small group that's never heard of it, although they're getting fewer all the time.
Yeah, I think expos have helped that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
And then secondly, there are those that have heard of it but are disinterested. And thirdly, there are those who have heard of it and are actually opposed to it. And there's still quite a bit of that going on. I wanted to reach those people, and the message I hope that book would give them is that if you don't get aboard this thing, you're going to be left behind, because it's better. It's better than what we've had in the past. Now, this sequel to it, Natural Horsemanship Explained, I targeted a completely different audience. I'm targeting the convert, the believer, including the clinician. I want them to understand why it works. Because if you understand why, you remove the mysticism from it, it's so much easier. I worked together with quite a few of these clinicians, done clinics together with quite a number of them, and I've had them make this comment to me. You know, listening to your part of this clinic is the first time I really understand why what I'm doing works. They know it works, and they know how to do it, but they don't understand the scientific background basis to it. And that is what I decided 20 years ago was going to be my goal, to give it a scientific basis and to make it rational and to help people understand it.
And what's the core of the scientific basis? Is it behavior? Is it herd behavior? Is it evolution? Is it genetics? What is it?
Yes, the answer is yes. It's the genetic behavior that is evolved in this particular species, because each species, in order to adapt to the environment in which it finds itself, must adapt in 3 ways. Anatomically, its form, physiologically, its function, and behavior. It takes all 3 to adapt to a given environment. And so the behavior is just as important as the anatomy and the physiology, and you have to understand that. And that's what natural horsemanship has done. It's taught us to talk to the horse in the horse's language, not in ours. Because our language as a species, I did zoo work throughout my career as a veterinarian, and I worked with lots and lots of chimps. Who sadly are our closest relatives, nearly 99% of the same DNA. And in the primates, the large primates, orangs, chimps, gorillas, and we are biologically speaking a primate, one of the large primates, what we see is a tendency towards violence, intimidation. We strike, we kick, we hit, we throw, we shout. That comes, you see it in children. That comes naturally to us, and it's only a veneer of civilization that takes that away from us. So when humans started working with animals, first the dog, the first domestic animal, and then many thousands of years later the horse, it was natural to use force. It comes to us naturally. We have to be taught not to use force, but to use psychology. And that's what this movement has done.
And that's what makes us special as human beings, I think, is the ability to overcome our natural instincts and approach working with other animals in a completely different way, one that is not natural to us.
Exactly. That's
and it's it's a responsibility.
Yes, we cannot ask the horse to assume human behavior. In fact, when it does, we've got what we call an outlaw. So it's up to us to learn how to, and that is not just happening in horses. It's happening in the dog world. In fact, next week, I'm speaking to the American Association of Pet Dog Trainers, and believe it or not, what did they ask me to speak on? The revolution in horsemanship. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so I guess your answer to the question would be, in the last couple of years, it has exploded.
It's exploded. It's all over the world, and it's in countries that you never would have thought it would reach. It's well into the third world now, and I communicate with people in the third world countries. It's going to take some time, but it's on its way because it's better. It works better.
And where are you seeing the effects of this explosion the most right now? Where are you seeing the benefits of it?
Well, I think the most dramatic change I've seen in traveling around the world has been in the Hawaiian Islands, because my first visit there 40 years ago, the horsemanship was so crude and so brutal, not because the people are cruel, but because that's what they were taught back in 1832, and they brought 3 vaqueros in to teach them, the Polynesians, how to rope, because the islands were overrun with wild cattle and wild horses that the colonists had brought in, and they decided to harvest them. And those methods became traditional, and now it's virtually completely gone now. Everybody's into
thanks
natural
to
horsemanship.
you and Linda Tellington-Jones, who lives there, I believe, right?
Now, somebody just told me recently that she's living there. I didn't know. No, I've never lived there, but I've been there 32 trips.
Oh, wow.
So last one was their first horse expo last August, and we're doing it again next August on the Big Island. I actually did a clinic there 40 years ago on the Parker Ranch, using they brought in 15 or 20. They had several thousand horses on the ranch at that time, and I asked for some difficult, spoiled horses. I was told by the ranch veterinarian, I don't want you to get hurt. He says, these are really bad horses. And he scared me, to be honest with you. I found they were one of the easiest bunch of horses I'd ever worked with, because they'd never been approached this way before. They'd never been approached with a gentle hand.
Do you think it's better to get the information before you start handling a horse, or to go in blind and just let the horse tell you what it needs?
Oh, absolutely. Get the information before. People that are new to it, they can find a clinician they like and go with their methods. I have run into lots of people who late in life got interested in horses and got right into natural horsemanship, and it's remarkable how in about 5 years, how accomplished they've become. I think best example I can give you is the movie producer Joe Camp, who has done the Benji series. 2 years ago, he got interested in horses, and he did a complete immersion into natural horsemanship, spending full time attending clinics, reading the books, watching the videos, and now he's written a book of his own on the subject, and I understand it's selling very well, and it's quite a good book, considering that he only had 2 years of experience. But it shows what can be done if you really have the desire. And this was, I think, in his 60s.
Well, I'll tell you what, we are running out of time here for this segment, which is sad because I think we could talk to you all day. I do want to mention to everybody that they can find your books at robertmmiller.com. And that all your information is there, and I want to tell you that you cost me $22 because my wife got looking around there this morning, and she wants Understanding the Ancient Secrets of the Horse's Mind. So, and she loves that deep kind of stuff, and she read the excerpt here, and she said, "This is what I've got to read." And Helena knows her, so she'll know that would be perfect for her.
Tell her there's also 7 videos that I've done.
Oh, great! Yeah, thanks. I think I'll pass on that, Dr. Miller. We'll hope she doesn't look into the site any further.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right,
Thank
great.
you
And
so
we encourage everybody to stop over there, get your new book, take a look at it, and will you come back on with us again sometime?
Anytime. Just give me a call.
All right.
If the phone doesn't answer, it means I'm out of town.
Okay, great. It means you're in Hawaii sunbathing on the beach. Thanks, Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was a great interview, guys, with Dr. I could have had him on all day.
He's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have him back just to listen to his stories. He's been around so long that he has all these great stories to tell about people when they were kids, like Pirelli.
Yeah, the history that he has that he can share is amazing. And who knew about Hawaii?
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, I didn't know about that either. That was fascinating, too. And that is where Linda Tellington-Jones lives. We actually interviewed her on the Talking Equine show.
That's right.
So, and she was a fun interview, too. She is a sweetheart. Matter of fact, it would be great to have them both on at the same time. Would be a very interesting show to have them both on.
We'd need a 4-hour show, Glenn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, next guest is Lisa Ross Williams, who is a natural horse care consultant. She's associate editor of the Natural Horse magazine, and that can be found at naturalhorse.com. And she's the host of the If Your Horse Could Talk show, which is a podcast also that debuted in 2001. She's been doing this a long time. She's earned a degree in environmental plant science and has completed the basic homeopathy veterinary course. I know I said that wrong, didn't I?
No, you got it.
Oh, good.
No, you said it right.
Oh, good. Through the British...
Homeopathy, is that it, Colleen?
Homeopathy.
Oh, okay. Through the British Institute of Homeopathy. So she's been around a while doing this, and that is the leading magazine on the subject today of natural horsemanship. So let's say hi to Lisa and see what she can add to the conversation today. Welcome, Lisa, to the show. We've had a great show so far, and we're glad to have you on. Now, you're the associate editor of the Natural Horse magazine. How long has that magazine been around?
Oh, a little over 10 years, actually. Randy and Jean Peters started that really before any of the natural stuff was popular.
Oh, okay. And what have you seen? Seeing the subject today, we're really talking about how natural horsemanship has changed in the last couple of years and evolved and where we're going from here. What have you seen in doing the magazine as to the response to it, the membership? You know, what do you see as the trend?
Well, it's certainly growing. In all natural horse care as well as horsemanship, people are realizing that this is the way to work with horses. And we certainly, I think probably in the past 4 to 5 years especially, there's been just a major explosion in people turning to this approach.
Great. Now, you do a lot of writing, I noticed, for the magazine, so you're deeply involved in this as well.
Oh, absolutely. It is my passion. I believe in empowering horse guardians to, again, a complete natural approach, which, of course, encompasses natural horsemanship as well. And the more information that we can get out there and the more light bulbs that go off in people's heads, the better off the horses are.
Now, you used a term that probably a lot of people haven't heard used before, and that's horse guardians.
Well, when you talk about owners, that is To me, we are their guardians. They're sentient beings, and I really don't like to say that I own any living thing. And I think that if we can change the way that we look at how we're involved with these horses, then that helps change people's mindsets on how we care for them and work with them.
What do you think is the greatest challenge to spreading the word or to getting the rest of the horse community to fully embrace natural horsemanship?
Oh, boy. I think it's just getting over I've been doing it this way for 30 years and generations before me. And, I think it's just kind of breaking that habit of the way people think, using force and fear and intimidation to make a horse do, to get over that and to think about how we can work together, how it can be a partnership and allow the horse to have a personality and a little bit of say-so in what we do with them.
So I have a question for you and Colleen both. Have you seen, because expos have been around now for quite a while, and of course natural horsemanship is a great part of the expos and has been for years thanks to Pirelli and all of them, have you seen the younger generation embracing this more, the kids that are now growing up into adults?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead,
Lisa.
Absolutely, and really that's where we really should be putting our focus, so that the kids grow up not knowing the conventional approach. If we can get to the kids, then that is natural. Natural horsemanship is the way to go, and we don't have to break all those bad habits with them. So certainly some of the different 4-H groups are starting to come on board, which is fantastic.
I agree. The kids are a lot more open-minded when it comes to this.
One of the things I did want to ask you about, because you have a degree in plants, is a little bit about the feeding aspect. We touched on it a little earlier, but we didn't really go into any detail with it. Have you seen that change, how people are feeding their horses, change over the last couple of years as well?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, equine nutrition is like one of my major passions. I love encompassing the whole horse, but truly without proper nutrition, that is the foundation for everything. So I do personally a lot of nutritional consultations, and I try to take the owners back to, or the guardians back to, what is natural. Frequent feedings. Let's use some natural sources instead of, a lot of these minerals and vitamins that are put in commercial horse feeds. Let's use some rose hips and garlic and kelp. And absolutely, people contact me from all over the world now wanting to go a little more natural with the feeding program.
It's interesting that you bring this up, because there are so many correlations to humans in all of this. We eat the way we feed our horses, too much sugar, all of those things.
Absolutely, and we find that actually usually how it happens is the humans start to eat a little bit better, and then they start questioning about how they're feeding their horses or their dogs and cats. Now with us, it was a little backwards. The horses were first, the dogs and cats were second, and Kenny and my husband were trying to do better feed-wise.
Less sweet feed?
Less sweet feed, less processed foods, absolutely.
Colleen, what do you feed your horses? Or how do you feed them, and what do you feed them?
Well, for a while there I was boarding, which was very interesting because I'd show up with various things like lettuce, zucchini, and people would look at me like, there she is, that crazy lady. And actually my horse, which was a horse I'd rescued, when I first gave her some of these things, she was like, what is this? She took the head of lettuce and tossed it out of her feed bucket like, I'm not eating this.
Same reaction I have to most of that stuff.
She'd become used to getting sweet feed and stuff like that. So once I came with all my little different vegetables and herbs, it took her a while, but then she just loved it.
Did she have?
The key is variety. A problem with boarding is that the people do what they want to do when they want to do it. They'll feed maybe once or twice a day, which isn't really the best thing for a horse. And I think Lisa will agree with me there that it's better to feed them throughout the day, like more natural, if they're not in the pasture.
Well, that's what their digestive system is set up for, is absolutely frequent feedings. And I actually have a book that's being published by Trafalgar Square on natural horse care, and I've got a huge chapter on nutrition. And I think of all the important points of that is frequent feeding, because that is how they are meant to eat. And just because humans have changed, that does not mean that the horse's digestive system has changed to meet that, feeding once or twice a day. So,
and we have a lot of problems in horses because they are fed unnaturally.
Have any of the large feed companies, the Purinas of the world, started to do their formulations better to accomplish that goal, or are they still old school?
Yes and no.
I think that from a marketing standpoint, yes, they're coming out and they're saying that they're going low carb and that they're trying to go more natural. But whether that's actually true, I don't, they're in it for the money. They're in it to make money. So the big feed companies are not on my high priority list by any means.
Did I read, you did an article on how to read labels, didn't you? Didn't I read that on your site?
Absolutely, yes.
What is your site again? Give that out so everybody can check out all the cool articles you've written over there.
Well, my website is naturalhorsetalk.com, and there's quite a few articles. And again, I pretty much cover the gamut, and all of that stuff will also be covered in the book. But even Natural Horse Magazine, which is naturalhorse.com, has some fantastic articles by other writers, too, as it pertains to nutrition and whatnot. So.
Here's a question for you. I also board my horse, and one of the things I'd like to do is at the moment he is on grain, although it is low carb. He's also out on pasture. But, and come October, the grass pretty much loses everything it has to offer. But one of the things that I find challenging is how do I approach my stable managers and say, listen, I would like my horse to be fed 3, maybe 4 times a day instead of bulk feedings of grain once in the morning and once at night, or even hay once at morning and once at night. And they look at it as high maintenance. Now we've got to feed this horse 3, 4 times a day. How do you say to them, how do you convince these traditional people that this is actually going to be better for the horse and better for you? What kind of catchphrases, what can I say to them to convince them that this is a good thing versus a high-maintenance bad thing?
Well, if it were me, and I tell some of my clients this, is go to them and say, if you want to cut down on the incidence of health problems, if you want to cut down on the amount of colics that we may be seeing, if you want to cut down on sand issues, sand colic issues, accumulation, then this is the way to go. And this is not a newfangled thing. The national research, the NRC for the nutrient requirement of horses, even those scientists, the very conventional people are stating in there that it's important to feed frequently. So, let them know, where they can get the information. Perhaps go and find some of these articles and books and copy them so that they can see it's not some of these crazy natural horse people that are saying it, but it's also some of the conventional.
Now, as a horse husband that used to own a large boarding stable, Helena, you're just the problem child.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Because I was the one that had to go out there and feed those extra 2 times. So,
you may want to, and I know it's very expensive to board horses at a boarding place, but you may want to offer them, a little bit more, and that's tough in this economy. But just let them know, we understand that this is out of the norm for you, but we want to keep our horses healthy, and I'm sure you want to do the right thing. So here's an extra $25 a month or something like that.
Right. Good point.
All right. Well, to draw a conclusion from today's entire show, to answer our question was, how has it changed and what's been the effect over the last couple of years? I think we can conclude that the effect is it's growing like crazy.
Absolutely, and it's very, it makes me so happy because, 12 years ago we were the crazy horse people who didn't put shoes on and, fed frequently and did all this crazy stuff, and now those people are coming back and saying, wow, we're doing the same thing and our horses are healthy. So absolutely, people are coming on board, and, I want to give kudos to the women because it's usually the women who make the change first. It really is. I think that they're more empathetic for their horses. They try to put themselves in the horse's place. So, again, kudos to the women, and there are men coming on board, and pretty soon, I believe, in 10 to 15 years, this will be the norm in horse care.
I agree.
Well, that's great, and I think part of that, again, comes back to the kids of today having grown up with it and seeing it at the expos and at clinics and all the places they've been. I think that's been so when we asked Dr. Miller what the turning point was probably 20 years ago when these expos and the Pirellis and those, I keep mentioning Pirelli because he was one of the first, but when all of when all of those guys were out there starting to do it, that was probably a turning point.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. I think there's people out there, you either love Pirelli or you hate him, it seems. But you have to give him kudos for bringing the awareness to so many people.
Absolutely. That's how we got started, was Pirelli. I went to a clinic and went, wow, this is fantastic. So there's awesome natural horsemen out there. Some are not as showboaty as Pirelli, and I don't mean that mean. You've got your Buck Brannaman and your Ray Hunt, those real rancher guys that are doing the same thing, just on a little lower key. And they're making big changes. And
Helena, we had Michael Richardson on. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he does the same thing from a wheelchair. He believes in that same training techniques and everything that natural horseman, and he's out there doing the expos as well.
I have to say that it also takes a fair amount of courage to try something new. My own horse, I just took his shoes off and decided to go with a natural hoof care specialist, and I was scared. I didn't know what would happen, but I thought, I'm just going to be brave and I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. And it is the best thing I could have done for my horse's feet. And he holds his hoof health for 8 solid weeks in ways that he never could have done before with shoes on. And it's a big payoff if you have the courage to try it. I think the payoff is just phenomenal. And then I think that just fuels the revolution that we're talking about. So just a plug for having the courage to try it.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Well, on that note, guys, we appreciate you being on with us, Lisa.
No problem. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And again, throw out there the websites, and we'll also put them on the show notes as well.
Well, certainly Natural Horse Magazine, which is naturalhorse.com. Again, they've been going for 10 years. Fantastic resource. Our website is naturalhorsetalk.com.
And you also have a podcast that you put out through iTunes, right?
We actually we have it on the internet.
Okay.
All the shows are archived, and we've been doing that. We debuted back in 2001, actually.
Yeah, you're doing this longer than any of us even thought about doing this.
Well, it's a passion, and I never planned on educating people to the extent that I have, but once I learned it, I realized it was also my responsibility not only to do it with my own horses, but to help other people learn how to do it. So we love what we do.
All right, great. Well, we appreciate it, Lisa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Well, that was great, guys. This has been a great show. I think we're a little bit over time here, but it was worth it today. I think you'll agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it went really quick.
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, Colleen, we'd like to thank you for being on with us today. You can find Colleen at the Natural Horse Network at naturalhorsenetwork.com. Do you have a set time that you do your live call-in shows?
Well, we just got into prime time, so we're now going to be doing them usually on Fridays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and that's so that more people can attend. I also wanted to say really quickly, I have my other site, Simply NHN, which is all natural horse care products and herbs for horses.
Excellent.
Okay, so you actually sell them there?
We do. We create some terrific blends, alternatives to the commercial feeds.
Oh, great. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So
Can you say the link to that site again?
It's simplynhn.com.
Okay, and we'll put a link to that on the show notes as well.
Great. Thank you guys very much for having me.
How can people find your radio show? Did they just go to your naturalhorsenetwork.com to find out the times and where to go and how to do it?
Yeah, the best place is to go to my radio page on my Natural Horse Network site.
Okay.
Or in our community, and I have all the information listed on that page on how to attend, how to send in questions, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. Well, everybody be sure to listen next week as we have a discussion about eventing with Olympian Gina Miles. And the following week, you don't want to miss the cloning show as we speak to scientists who are actually doing the work. Be sure to subscribe through iTunes so you don't miss an episode. Our show notes can be found at stablescoop.com and our blogs also at stablescoop.com. If you want to leave us feedback, you can send us an email at geeks, Geeks, at horseradionetwork.com or send us a voicemail at 270-803-0025, 270-803-0025. Thanks again, and we hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll see you next week, Helena.
Yep, we'll be back with the scoop.